Welcome back, folks. I'm Frizz, and today I'd like to go over what new stuff we heard at Paizocon about the Pathfinder 2 Remaster Project. In particular, this video is going to be covering the stuff regarding player core, since that's the majority of the information that we got, and it's also what I'm the most excited about. For the record, I'm also gonna be focusing on mechanical changes rather than stuff that I've already covered, or just simple name changes for legal reasons. Anyway, let's get down to business. Alright, so first off, we're getting a new damage type with spirit damage. While that might not sound all that interesting, it's actually incredibly related to divine magic. Spirit damage directly attacks the spirit, and spells that previously did alignment damage are now going to be doing spirit damage. It's specifically great against ghosts, since they literally are just a spirit. But it's actually more interesting than that. See, clerics have the ability to sanctify themselves to their deity, and only some deities require it. And once you do it, you gain the holy or unholy trait. Then, whenever you deal spirit damage, it can trigger weaknesses that certain enemies have to holy or unholy damage. Unfortunately, there isn't going to be a chaos or law option, but that is a pretty easy homebrew for a GM. While I believe that Paizo hasn't explicitly stated it, I would be shocked if only clerics have the ability to sanctify themselves. I'm guessing that it'll be an archetype or religion skill feat, or something like that, but everyone's going to get the ability to sanctify themselves somehow, even if they have to go a little bit out of their way for it. But that isn't the only broad change that'll affect how spells are written. I'm afraid to say it, but schools of magic are being removed as well. Yep, there isn't going to be categories of spells anymore that are explicitly called out, like evocation, transmutation, or necromancy. One of the largest reasons, and probably the largest, behind this change is because schools of magic are a D&D thing, so they need to change the name and just remove them for legal reasons. But also, schools of magic hardly ever came up in-game. If you're wanting to still use schools of magic in your own game, you absolutely still can. It's just not an unofficial rule. Also, somatic and verbal components are gone, so you can just describe how it is your character is casting spells if, they don't want to do a bunch of fancy hand motions. The final adjustment regarding spells is that Paizo is adjusting the focus spell system. Instead of having to spend a focus point before you can use refocus again, you can refocus whenever you want so long as you're missing at least one focus point. This means that if you manage to have a max of 3 focus points in your pool at level 5 and you're at 0, you can spend 30 minutes to be back up to 3 focus points again. That's different because right now you would only be able to refocus once, and then you wouldn't be able to do it again until you spend the point you just got, so you'd be stuck at 1 focus point for the rest of the day. I'm a huge fan of this, since focus spells are generally really cool, and you kind of being limited to just 1 a fight is a bit of a shame. Also, there's apparently going to be a feat, we don't know what level, that is going to allow you to get your entire focus point back in 1 single refocused 10-minute period. I'm really looking forward to it. Before we get into talking about the announced changes to classes, we did hear some stuff regarding ancestries and heritages. First off, leshies and orcs are going to be core ancestries now. This really does fit, since it's honestly weird that orcs weren't core already, and leshies are basically a mascot of the system at this point, just like goblins. I mean, really, look at leshy art and tell me that they are not exceptionally cute. Additionally, Paizo seems to be planning to turn half-elf and half-orc into versatile heritages, rather than just being restricted to humans. I am also hoping that there are going to be rules for other mixed ancestries, or at the very least, a way to get adopted ancestry at level 1. Finally, we're getting the Nephilim and Changeling versatile heritages in player core. Changelings seem like they're going to be pretty interesting. They're still probably going to be similar to the changelings we already have, but considering that Paizo is going to be going back to the original folktales regarding hags in the remaster, I'm certain that there's going to be some interesting changes regarding changelings. Nephilim are a general planar ancestry, and right now they basically are going to be combining Azamar and Tieflings. Aasimar and Tiefling were terms used under the OGL, and obviously that means that they need to go, and Nephilim seems like it's going to open up the possibility of a ton of really interesting options in the future. Plus, the Aphorite and Gonzi versatile heritages are also going to be considered Nephilim, though they aren't going to be in this book because of page space. Finally, we can get around to talking about the classes. Let's start off with the classes that don't seem to be getting huge, wide-sweeping changes. Bards, fighters, rangers, and rogues aren't getting that significant of changes, since they're already in a pretty good spot. Bards are going to be able to use martial weapons, which by extension means that the warrior muse is going to be getting extra stuff, because that was their thing in the current rules. Fighters aren't really getting any changes outside of the open trait being scrapped, because really, the open trait never mattered. The largest change for rangers is that warden spells are going to become a basic part of the class, and that they're polishing up some feats. Finally, rogues are getting martial weapon proficiency, meaning that finally they're a real martial class. Also, ruffian rogues have got to be getting something to make up for base rogues getting martial weapons. Either way, I'm looking forward to a lot of these changes because I think that they're going to make the classes that they have more versatile regarding character options. Druids aren't getting any drastic adjustments. Instead, they're focusing on adding options for the druidic orders that are already in the game. For instance, a lot of the orders that are out right now don't have the same amount of feats available to them, so they're focusing on adding options for orders that may not have as many feats as others, and plus, there seems like it's going to sound like there's a way to affect the environment around you whenever you cast spells, which is just, like, super rad. Like, leaving snow around you all the time because you're that closely tied with winter storms is badass. Finally, the name of Druidic is changing for OGL reasons, and I am very excited for how, supposedly, it's going to be easier to talk to plants. I'm certain that my GM is not excited for it, though, because, oh boy, that's going to complicate things. Next up, clerics are getting some adjustments, thank God. Seriously, clerics needed a lot of work. War priests, in particular, are getting a lot of brand new stuff to help make the doctrine a more appealing option. And I'm so damn excited. They're going to be able to get master level proficiency with their deity's favorite weapon, keeping pace with full martials, and ways of getting heavy armor as a war priest within the cleric itself, meaning that you won't have to take a sentinel archetype. Plus, it sounds like there's going to be a ton of really interesting feats. I'm just happy that war priests are not really going to just be a sad choice for a character anymore. Now let's talk about witches. I've been critical of the current state of witches on this channel, and the changes that Paizo have said that they're going to be making seem wonderful. They're going to be leaning into the flavor of being a witch dramatically more now, which I'm so thankful for, since as they are right now, witches just don't feel very witchy. They just feel like kind of spooky prepared spellcasters. Patrons in particular are going to be adjusted, and in ways that make them both more mysterious and also just more interesting. Like, what sounds cooler? Saying that your mysterious patron has an affinity for curses, or saying that you get your spells from an unknown entity only known as the Resentment. Plus, it seems like familiars are going to be getting a lot of really interesting boosts, which they need because witches are basically the premier familiar class, and right now they don't live up to it. So imagine if you cast a hex spell, or possibly any spell, it causes your familiar to cause a flash freeze all around them, or become incredibly distracting, allowing them to provide flanking. There's a lot of really cool stuff, and all of that stuff is on top of a lot of buffs regarding feats and hexes, which were also desperately needed. Finally, we get around to wizards. At their core, wizards aren't really changing. The exception is that schools of magic aren't a thing anymore, meaning that wizards are going to have to change. Because, obviously, you can't have a specialized school of magic if there aren't schools of magic. Instead, wizards are going to be focusing more on the literal places where they learned magic. Every wizard is going to have to pick a schooling option at level 1 instead of a school specialization, and the options so far announced are very cool. For example, the ones that they have announced so far are Battle Magic, Civic Wizardry, Protean Form, and Unified Magical Theory. While they are more specific than Schools of Magic, because you don't have like an additional slot every day or spell level slot every day that can prepare like any necromancy spell, you just have the one spell related to Civic Wizardry, they seem like they're gonna be really wonderful and have interesting focus spells. You might not think that Civic Wizardry would be very helpful in a fight, but that's only if you haven't seen the utility of having a wall wherever you need one, and the absolute destructive power of a wall falling exactly where you need it to. I've previously made it clear on this channel that I'm excited for the remaster, but Paizocon made me way more excited. I think that the only change so far that's been announced that I'm not a big fan of is Rangers inherently having primal magic. But that's ultimately pretty minor, and I'll hold off on judgment until I see it for myself. Really, Paizo seems to have nailed what Pathfinder 2e needs with the remaster. And just as a reminder, all of the new and old rules are still going to be available online for free, so it's not like Paizo is trying to strong-arm you into buying all of their books. I still do recommend it though, since Paizo does fantastic work. Thanks for watching. This is probably going to be my last video on Paizocon for a while now, but it's been fun. Gen Con is coming up pretty quickly, and I'm certain that there's going to be more announcements at Gen Con than there were at Paizocon. But what do you think about these changes? A lot of them are due to no longer using the OGL, but I think that they're good. Let me know in a comment down below, and while you're down there, you can always subscribe or consider joining the channel as a member. My members help me out an incredible amount. But regardless, until I see you next, live a wonderful life.